one of the things that was one of the things that I think we should have gotten earlier, or should have had a conversation about earlier, was that we each process things differently. Like, the main reason that I think I was so pissy most of the time is because just as I was processing something, just as I was like, oh, this is what she meant by this, I mean, I know that I technically need to do my part, but blah, just going through whatever things I had in mind, just as I was getting through with that, it'd be like meeting time. I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to have to hear mom be like, well, you said, and you didn't, and blah, blah, blah. It's just like restarting things without completing, like restarting a cycle without completing it. So had I been better at communicating that I needed more time in a way that wasn't screamy.
Right, because I would discover that you needed more time.
Yeah, that's been a thing for a minute though, like wanting to communicate something properly. Like, what you need could be perfectly logical, but how you're saying it is weird. And as somebody that's, as someone that's been giving constructive criticism and been taking constructive criticism for a lot of things, that was something that I had to learn really early. Like, you could say something and it's perfectly logical, but how you say it is going to affect how people listen, even if it's not, especially logical in my mind. That is how communicating with people works, and you have to be willing to do something about that if you don't want the relationship to break down.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then wonder why I'm not open with them, be upset that I'm not telling them things, but when I want to tell them things, then they don't want to hear it, or they don't want to hear it a certain way. And that's a weird line to walk, because like I said, you do have to communicate with people a certain way if you want to have a conversation, but other times it's like, there is no other way to say this. What you're doing irritates me. Yeah, that, like, it can be really difficult to take criticism in anything
at any age,
but
anything.
I think specifically when it comes to relationship, like, parenting criticism must be like a really weird thing to hear where you're like, how do you yeah.
And a part of how I manage that is to try to not look at it as criticism, because for me that has a connotation, even though there's of course constructive criticism. I know that I guess I'm just not ready for that yet. When my kid does it, it definitely is like, it has that it has that feeling like, who are you talking to, what the hell, all of that stuff. However, that's why I keep saying that phrase out loud, resistance is the roadmap, because what's happening with my daughters is that they're trusting that they can express a feeling to me, and that's going to matter to me, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, and you can step in if that feels like, what the hell is she saying? For me, it doesn't mean, they know that it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to agree with what they're saying, or that it's going to work out wonderfully. Oh, you've expressed your feelings, so whatever it is you want, I honor it. Nah, it's not that. But it's that it's a safe enough space that they have the right to expect to be heard, especially by me and by Chris, their dad. And all of us have the right to be heard. And because there is an inherent power imbalance, I see it as my responsibility, and I want them to see it as my responsibility to make space for them to be heard. Period. Period. And that I'm raising people who also expect to be heard, who know what it's like to be heard, and can therefore, and also when they don't feel heard, and that they have practice and language for expressing those feelings, when they're not feeling heard. Because if they don't have that practice at home, we know from experience, when we get out the home, it's not like we automatically develop those skills. You do the same thing. You feel stuck. You blame people for not being able to hear you or feel you when you haven't really communicated. You made assumptions. All of these tools that we don't get a chance to practice, but we hold each other to as adults, we can affect that in our homes.
Yeah. I remember when I used to actually get told to, like, fix my face or to shut up. Those were things that were blatant disrespect to me, if I can say that, because it was a really clear sign of not seeing us on an equitable playing field, you
Right.
know? Like,
Yeah.
it's definitely not here, but
right. So
yeah.
like the idea of equal versus equitable, as we talk about all the time, they're not, we're not equal. We're just not. But we certainly can cultivate and should cultivate an equitable relationship, and which means then that respect is the basis for communication in both directions. It's not a different type of respect because I'm older or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,